Hey everyone, it's Angela Allen from the Handmade Homestead. Welcome back to day 16 of the Every Bit Counts Challenge, put on every year by Three Rivers Homestead in the month of August. We're steaming our way through, and today is no exception. This has been a very good year for tomatoes. I probably have about 70 pounds of frozen whole tomatoes like these in my freezer ready to be made into sauce sometime this fall when I have the time and I'm not in the thick of dealing with all the produce in the garden, and I can pull out my great big 22-quart roaster and roast off tomatoes for making sauce for 2 or 3 days. The other tomatoes we're making into other products or eating fresh. I did do a batch of tomato jam just a couple of days ago. I'll put that up here for you so you can find the link. And yeah, it's delicious. You'll really like that. And it did use about 8 pounds of tomatoes. But these tomatoes, well, I have to deal with them because I need to pick tomatoes from the garden again. So I am going to put these into a pan and I'm going to make pasta sauce. My intention is to make lasagna for supper tomorrow night, and this is enough to make probably 3 meals worth of sauce. 1 meal's worth we'll leave out for lasagna. The other 2, I'm actually just gonna freeze them in freezer bags, throw them in the freezer for wintertime use. I could can them, but the problem is I don't want to run the canner for 2 jars of pasta sauce. So I can just freeze them and defrost them and use them from a bag instead of a can. Yes, it does take up more space in my freezer, and I don't have a lot of empty space now with all of the produce coming in from the garden, but it would be worth it to not spend the energy and the time, and frankly, it's so warm to heat up my whole kitchen for 2 jars of pasta sauce. So that's what I'm gonna do. Gonna get that sauce made and processed, and I'll be able to put 2 meals worth of pasta sauce away for another time today, and that will fulfill my putting something away part of the challenge. All right, so these have all been washed. These are the ones I'm going to process. These I don't really need to process today. Maybe, we'll see. Depends on how much this cooks down to, and that's going to take all day on the stove. So these have already been washed. I'm going to get them chopped up and into the pot and get the pasta sauce going. This is garlic roasted olive oil, and this is previously preserved, I'm going to show you, pickled garlic. Anything in the alum family is not my friend. But again, these are green onions. They impart a very similar flavor. That will work. My family doesn't even notice the difference. I don't think there are too many things that look better than that in life. What do you think? Let me know below. Let's talk a little bit about tomatoes for a minute. There are lots of different kinds of tomatoes. You guys know about big beef steak tomatoes, sauce tomatoes like this San Marzano has a very distinctive shape. These are Juliet extra large grape cherry tomatoes or saladette tomatoes. These are also very meaty, and they're very much like a Roma tomato. Great for sauce too. And then there's cherry tomatoes. Here we go, they're falling all over the place. Cherry tomatoes are really small, and most people wouldn't think to use them for sauce. But the thing is, cherry tomatoes pack a punch of flavor. There are entire sauces, like fresh sauces made, or even long cooked sauces made with cherry tomatoes because they have so much flavor. The other thing you should know about tomatoes, these tend to have lower seeds. This one's a little cracked, had a little trouble growing. It's in the end of the season for this plant, but it doesn't matter because I will cut that off and just process the bottom half for sauce. beefsteak tomatoes, salad, bigger salad tomatoes, these have big holes in them and they tend to have a lot of liquid and a lot of seeds. Where cherry tomatoes and Italian tomatoes or paste tomatoes, there's a lot more meat than there are seeds. So you get thicker sauce, you don't have to cook it down so much, and you don't get all that bitterness from the seeds or have to go through the struggle of removing them. The other thing about tomatoes is tomatoes all vary. So when you can tomatoes, you do have to add a little bit of acid, a little citric acid or a little bit of lemon juice just to make sure they're acid enough. Old-fashioned tomatoes had a higher acid level, but some of the new ones coming out, they're milder, especially yellow ones, don't seem to have much acid in them at all. So they wouldn't be safe to can without the addition of extra acid to make them safe. You don't want to have botulism, trust me. Some tomatoes crack easily when there's rain. The skin is tight, and especially cherry tomatoes, smaller tomatoes tend to have tougher skin. So when they get a big rainstorm comes and they absorb all that water, the meat inside and the fruit inside just absorbs all the water and cracks the skin. So that's something, you just cut that off. As long as there's no bugs or fungus or crap growing on, you just cut it off and it's fine to use. So when you're making tomato sauce, it's best to use a meaty tomato that's not going to give you a ton of extra water, because water means you have to cook it longer. But you can use any tomato for sauce that you're making to use then. If you're making it to can, you really want tomatoes that are made for canning. One, to shorten the time it takes to cook them, but also to make sure the acid is high enough. So if you can them, it's really easy to can your own tomato products. It's water bath canning, not pressure canning, but you do want to make sure you always add that little bit of lemon juice or a little bit of citric acid. The other thing I wanted to say is there's an advantage to making fresh sauce over making sauce and canning it for your pantry shelves. If you make fresh sauce and you put it in the freezer, then you have much more leeway in what you actually put in the sauce. I was canning this because it wouldn't be pressure canned, at least not in my house. It would be water bath canned tomato sauce. I wouldn't be able to put meat of any kind in it. I wouldn't be able to put chunks of vegetables in it, extra herbs. I would have to stick to a recipe that didn't alter the acid balance of the finished sauce. But if I'm putting it in the freezer, I can put meat in it, chicken in it, bouillon if you like the flavor of that in place of salt. You could put all kinds of herbs, chunks of vegetables, even low acid vegetables like green beans or zucchini or eggplant. You can put extra cheese. Some people like to put some cheese or the rind of a Parmesan rind in it, or those kinds of things. You can do anything like that if you're going to put this in the freezer as opposed to canning it. Remember all those tomatoes at the beginning of the video? Well, this is all I have left. And I could probably even use those if I could fit them in my pan. I think I will. Is all of those tomatoes that you saw earlier. I didn't put any water in this pan at all. This is all the liquid from the tomatoes as they cook down. You can see there's the cherry tomatoes. There's some of the bigger chunks of tomatoes. So I need to cook this down to get all this liquid down so that it's thicker. Okay, and here's our finished sauce. As you can see, this is a really big pan. I hit it with a stick blender instead of taking out the skins. I always like to keep them for the extra flavor, but you can see there's no seeds in there anyway. The black you see is because this has Kalamata olives and herbs in it, as well as a little bit of mint, spearmint. My grandmother put spearmint in everything. She was Sicilian. And yeah, it is ready to cool off. Put some aside for tomorrow's dinner. And then the rest of this will go in the freezer. There's probably 4 or 5 servings. I think this is a 6-quart pan. So we've got meals to go in the freezer. I want to say 4 or 5 of these will go in the freezer. 1 will be kept out for tomorrow's supper.